right. There's Kate. Let's add her in. Hey.
Hey, how are ya?
All right. Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Hey, everyone out there. My name is Joey. I am the CEO and founder of Greek Law. For those of you who are new, Greek Law is a program that I started back in 2016 during my first year of law school. And basically, the idea of what we do is we travel to universities, high schools, middle schools, all over, and do presentations and lectures about sexual assault awareness and prevention, and as well as consent. So we are here doing our very first live stream today in the middle of this worldwide event that we're dealing with. Um, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the month of April. And, just like other small businesses, this little pandemic has affected us as well. We had so much cool stuff planned for March and April. We were going to Auburn University, Mizzou, Simmons. We had like a little mini tour of Indiana schools that we were going to hit up. All of that postponed, canceled due to the Rona. So, but it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so I was thinking, well, what can we do? How can we still put content out? And I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't I just call up some of my friends, call up some of the people who I like the most, and just start talking? So here we are, the Teal Tint series, and it's basically just me talking to some of my favorite people about their experiences, their opinions, their thoughts about sexual assault awareness, and kind of what we can do to uh, what's the saying that we're doing now? Flatten the curve. So how can we flatten the curve on collegiate sexual assault? So got my live stream, got my bourbon, and yeah, here we are. So I want to introduce our special guest for this evening. Me and her, we go all the way back. We go all the way back to undergrad. When I was a teak, she was an AL Pi. She has so many accolades. I'm going to have to let her tell you all the stuff that she does. But one thing I always tell people is that when an 18 or a 19-year-old woman joins a sorority and thinks, what am I going to be in like 10 years? It's her. It's her right there. She is still the standard sorority woman. So let me introduce to you Miss Kate Sureck. Kate, how are you?
Hi, Joey. I'm well. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm glad to
Well,
be here.
thank you for doing that. I'm gonna turn me up a little bit so I can hear you
Sure,
better.
sure.
So yeah, Kate. Start by telling them just kind of some of the stuff you do. I know that you're Miss Philanthropy, so anytime there's a philanthropy to be done, call you. But
Mhm.
let's just start by telling viewers kind of what your resume is. What do you do? Where have you been? Hit me up with that.
Sure. So I work in higher education. I work in admissions, and I've been in higher ed for about 12 years now, postgraduate, and I have been in the admissions office for about 7 years at my current school. I love what I do. But I have been in higher ed ever since I finished college because when I was in college, I had a quarter life crisis trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I realized that if I could just never leave university, that would be the best thing in the world. So here I am at 34, still working at a university and still doing a lot with AOPI, and I could not be happier about it.
Awesome, awesome. Coming from good old Indiana, right?
That's right. Yes, yes.
Absolutely. Well, you and I, we've worked before on some of this Greek law stuff. For any Sigma Kappas that might be tuning in, you gave an awesome talk at a Sigma Kappa meeting at the University of Louisville. Was that last year that we did that?
It was. Yeah, last spring, I believe, maybe the fall.
Okay.
But
So
yeah.
yeah, you did an amazing talk about your experiences back then, and I kind of want to just dip back into that. So when
Sure.
you started your presentation, you kind of talked a little bit about the first time that someone like noticed you because of what your body looked like. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in a really small town in southwestern Indiana, and I kind of had a normal Midwestern upbringing. Like I said, small town. My parents were married for 38 years. I have an older brother, lots of extended family. And, by all intents and purposes, my life was pretty normal and pretty unassuming. The only thing, if you would have ever asked me as a child anything about my body, I would have just said, well, I guess I'm tall for my age. Which is true because at 9 years old, I was 5'5", and now at 34, I am 5'5.5". So I haven't grown very much in that time, but that's pretty much the only thing I could have told you about anything with me physically, other than, blonde hair, blue eyes, this is my height, and that's it. Well, whenever I was in fifth grade, my family, we went on a vacation for spring break. And when we were on that vacation, I remember we were by the pool, kind of just hanging out or whatever. And I want to say maybe to go to the restroom. I don't know. But I had just left my family for a brief minute and I was coming back. And in that moment, there was a group of guys who were probably about college age, and they're all bantering and having a good time and everything. And one of them notices me, and then they all start to kind of point and talk about me, and they're laughing. And I remember like looking around, and I was like, well, I'm the only person here, so obviously they're laughing at me, and that makes me super uncomfortable. But then the really big part was, one of the guys got out their camera actually and took a picture of me, and then all of the guys started laughing. And now you have to remember, this was in the 90s, this was 1995, so there wasn't that inconspicuous, like, I'm going to take a selfie, but I'm actually taking a picture of somebody else. Like, they had to get out their Kodak, and wind it up and actually
Right.
take a physical picture of me, a 10-year-old. And then they proceeded to talk about my body and judge my body and everything. And it was in that moment that I realized, people are going to talk about other people's physical features. And not only that, but they felt like they had a right to, and they had a right to my body and to judge it and what they thought of it and what the standards of that should be. And, like I said, keep in mind, I was 10 years old. So these guys that were talking about me and judging me were at least twice my age if they were in college. And so as a 10-year-old, I was already, for one reason or another, being sexualized to a point where they thought that they had a right to discuss my body. And, that was also, unfortunately, kind of a day that my childhood ended. And I hate to say it that way. That sounds kind of dark. But I had all of this innocence, like I said before, where if you had asked me about my physical features, it would have been blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'5", and that would have been it. But that moment, I was so traumatized by what had just happened. And these guys were talking about my body, and then I realized, well, apparently something about my body is not good enough if they're making fun of it. So unfortunately, that was the first day that I decided I was going to make a change with my body, and the way that I went about doing that was making myself sick after I started eating. And unfortunately, that kind of spiraled into a 17-year eating disorder.
Wow. The craziest thing about that story is just to think that you were 10. Like, you
Exactly.
were like so young, and
Mm-hmm.
these are college age, these are college age guys. Like, I think about how I was whenever I was like 20 or so. Like, I'm not looking at 10-year-olds on the beach. So
Right.
that is just that's kind of crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
That happened so young. And so, as you said, that kind of led to, an eating disorder. That was going to be my next question. Kind of how did that, make you feel in the moment? I'm sure that, at 10 years old, there was probably a little bit of confusion too. Like, why are these guys looking at me for?
Right, absolutely. And I didn't actually think about it until much later, how strange it was that college age boys were judging my body. I knew from what people told me that I'd always looked older, and like I said, I was taller, but to actually think about, the quantitative numbers behind it, and to know that that was happening at such a young age is disconcerting, to say the least, unnerving, honestly. But even in its most, I guess, simple form, taking the sexuality part out of it, just knowing that I was all of a sudden being judged for physical features without anybody knowing anything about who I was as a person, kind of just flipped the script on how I felt about myself, you know, and that was kind of, like I said, the spiral that began the eating disorder and began me thinking like, well, I've got to do whatever I can to make people like me. And apparently that's based on physical traits.
Hmm.
So,
Now, so you yourself are a survivor, actually several times over.
mhm.
So I know that's another thing that you talk about in your presentation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? A little bit about, kind of your first experience on a college campus?
Yeah, so I was actually getting my master's degree. And I went to a really small school in Eastern Kentucky. And when I was getting my master's degree, that evening I was with a male friend, and I was going to his dorm just to watch a movie. And it was, you know, innocent enough, in my opinion. We were friends, and I had no romantic or sexual interest in this guy. And so I thought that was it. I just thought that that was, you know, as complex as the situation was. Um, but then whenever we were in the dorm, at that point, he started to make sexual advances at me, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And then when I started to leave, he actually kind of pinned me against the door, grabbed my arm. There ended up being a bruise and everything going on. Um, and he exposed himself to me. I mean, there was just a lot. It happened so fast that even now, whenever I try to like unpack it in my mind, there are pieces that are fuzzy because it just happened so fast. But I knew like what was happening was not something that I wanted to happen. Um, you know, after the fact, I would go through over and over again, like, did I do something? Did I give advances? You know, should I have told them like, yeah, I'm going to come to your dorm, but I'm not interested in you, in anything but a platonic friendship, you know? And so I had already started, victim blaming myself on what did I do that, you know, gave these signals that he thought this was okay. And so
Right.
I leave the situation and I tell my roommate, and my roommate says, well, you need to report this to, you know, at least the institution police. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that, you know?
Hmm.
And my reasoning, I had a lot of reasons, but, you know, being in this small little town, um, talk was like wildfire, you know?
Right.
And if you dated a person, everybody already knew about it. And if you dated two people, now they really had something to say. And I had already heard that there were rumors or gossip or things, and my name had come up a couple of times. And I just thought, I don't want my name to be fodder for more people's gossip. And I just
Right.
didn't see a positive outcome for me reporting him as far as my well-being. So I just never reported it.
I gotcha. Yeah, there's several things I feel like to unpack there. I mean, first, I feel like anytime us administrators we talk about sexual assault on a campus, we always are quick to, let people know it's like, hey, it's not necessarily the shadowy figure waiting for you in the alley. Most times it's someone someone who you're friends with or you're close to or something. So, that's something that we always talk about. And, I think that rings true. The other thing is, I think the number one thing I think I hear people say whenever there's an assault is, well, why didn't you report? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
didn't you, if that had been me, I would have, ran straight up to, whatever office I could and, yell it from, the tower. And but I think there's a lot of different reasons why someone wouldn't report. I mean, yours is a perfect example. Being in that small town where everyone's talking, it's like, yeah, you may win that victory, with the administration, but you might lose the war in public opinion. So,
Right.
uh,
Exactly.
yeah, so that's
Exactly.
rough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one question that I had to go along with that is, what type of support did you look for? Now, I know that you didn't report it, but was there, any other ways that you looked for support? Were there people that you maybe leaned on during that time to kind of help you through, or did you kind of have to just swallow that and kind of deal with it yourself?
You know, that one was one that I definitely did a lot of swallowing and was like, I'm not telling anybody about this, other than, like I said, my roommate. And she was wonderfully supportive. And she even said, if you don't want to report it, that I will respect that. But she was like, I just think, I want you to think it through and everything. So I didn't ever tell. It's funny because I never thought that I would tell anybody about this. And then since I gave the talk to Sigma Kappa last fall, I've talked about it a lot. So clearly that didn't happen how I had planned. But yeah, it really, until I'd had my encounters later, I never really brought it up again. And it was after I'd had my encounters later in life that I thought, this is very unnerving. The fact that
Mhm.
I have been sexually assaulted multiple times, and trying to work through all those things and have self-reflection and trying to see, well, but why is this happening? You know.
Right. So another story that I know you tell is, an incident that happened, in the professional world. Whenever you
Mhm.
had, you were done with school and now you're, in your job, walking to work. What happened there?
Yes. So that was definitely a crazy story. And I definitely want to make the delineation too that I was a professional at this time, but this did not happen at my employer. It did not have,
Okay.
it had nothing to do with my job. So I want to make that very
Right.
clear because my employer was very supportive when this happened.
Okay.
But um, I was walking to work. So where I worked was downtown in Indianapolis, and my parking garage was like a half mile away. So I would, make the trek every morning and every evening. And I wasn't alone by any means. I mean, it was like a Tuesday, maybe. Everybody was going into work at that time, and I was standing at a crosswalk waiting to cross, just like everybody else. And before I knew it, a guy came up behind me, and I had a skirt on that day, and he put his hand in between my legs and up my skirt. And he was not inconspicuous about it at all. He made a big show of it, and he thought he was really funny. And I was at this crosswalk with like 10 or 15 other people, right? And so everyone was kind of like flabbergasted when it happened. And I was in shock to begin with. And then that shock quickly made its way into, shame and embarrassment. And I
Mhm.
couldn't figure out, out of everybody in this darn city, everyone who's standing at a crosswalk, everyone who's going around, what was it about me that made him think like, I'm going to touch her and I'm going to make her uncomfortable? So that
Right.
was the second time that I experienced sexual assault in a much more public setting. Um, but I do have to say, like, it was really great. I was actually walking with a coworker at that time, and I got to our office, and I told my boss what was going on, and my employer and my boss and my coworkers were wonderfully supportive.
Hmm.
They called the police for me, and actually one of my coworkers and my boss, they did like it was like an episode of Law and Order. They went downtown and they actually tracked down the guy and like had eyes on him and everything. It was just bananas. Um, but we were able to get the police involved and get a detective involved, and he was eventually identified.
Now, he gets identified, and, you have witnesses. It happened in the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
There are more than enough people that would, I'm sure, go into a courtroom and testify, yes, Your Honor, this happened. So, it would seem as if, all the ducks were in the row for,
Mm-hmm.
this guy to get handled by, the legal system. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not what happened, is it?
Well, that's a really great question because there's a lot of question marks in what happened in general. I'd had, after that situation, I'd had a lot of anxiety just kind of about the whole thing for months, knowing that eventually there were going to be some court dates, and my coworker was going to be summoned and I was going to be summoned and have to testify and all these kind of things. But then a couple months into it, my coworker said that she called about the summons and she had just kind of been told, I don't remember if the case was dropped, if it was settled out of court or whatever, but essentially it was you don't need to come in. This is no longer an issue. And, I had a real juxtapositions of feelings because on the one hand, there was this huge amount of relief that like I didn't have to go through this any longer. I didn't have to
Right.
deal with this. I didn't have to wonder what was going on. I didn't have to see him again or explain my side or, have, a defendant attorney talk to me and make me feel like I've done something. And I was petrified of that. Um, so on the one hand, there was definite relief, but on the other hand, it is strange to me that I never heard anymore about this gentleman or the situation that happened after that. But to try to look at the positives of the situation, I go back to how fantastic the officers and the detective were that day. They were wonderfully supportive of me. My friends and my coworkers were fantastic. And it was just a really wonderful circle of support I had around me. And that time it was much easier for me to tell people what happened because of that support.
Right. I just got in reading the book Know My Name by Chanel Miller, who was the survivor in the Brock Turner case. And one of the themes that went throughout her book was how long her court case took. A lot of it, and I mean, that's the legal system anyway. A lot of it's hurry up and wait.
Right.
So something that, could honestly take a week or 2 weeks gets drawn out for a year
Mm-hmm.
because there's other cases that are going on, and there's motions to be made and stuff like that. But one of the themes that kind of went through the book was the anxiety
Mm-hmm.
that she felt waiting, just waiting to testify. Did you feel any anxiety on your end, kind of while the wheels
Oh,
were rolling?
yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a constant, especially because we didn't have answers on things and we were waiting for this court date, or I was constantly waiting, like, am I going to hear from somebody? What's going on? And so it was a consistent, like, low level of anxiety, kind of like a pit in your stomach for maybe weeks or months. And every single time I would forget about it, all of a sudden, I even remember having this feeling like I should be stressed out about something. I've been really stressed out about something. What was that thing? And then it would
Right.
come back to me. I just got used to having that level of anxiety and that emotion just kind of right on the edge for months because I didn't know what was going to happen, or how
Right.
long it was going to be drawn out.
For all of the sexual assault cases that are actually reported, there are so many more that are just not reported. And I think that a part of the reason why is, first of all, there's distrust with the system. And I mean, I'm with that. I can totally see where that distrust comes from. I mean, when someone sexually assaults someone, is found guilty of it, and then gets 3 years or 3 months, sorry, 3 months in jail. I mean, I can definitely see where mistrust comes from and anxiety comes from. What is some advice that you would give someone that is, kind of maybe teetering on the fence on whether or not they should pursue something legally? Maybe they're worried about the anxiety, they're worried about the system. What's some advice that you would give them?
You know, I could never tell a survivor one way or another what they should do, because it is deeply personal for each person, as far as reporting it or not reporting it. Um, but I would definitely say talking to someone and finding that circle of support first, whether that is a friend or a family member. If you don't feel that you could talk to anybody in your circle like that, you know a counselor, a therapist, a doctor, just talking to somebody, because once you actually start to talk about it, it does normalize it. um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's unfortunate that that is something that happens, but the more you talk about it, the easier it is to talk about. And I think once it becomes easier and you can kind of start to disassociate the emotion from the actual fact behind it, you're able to more clearly define if it is something that you want to pursue legally. um, and so I think that that's just really, really important to be able to tell your story.
Gotcha. Your story, if we start all the way back at the beach and we come to right now at this
Mhm.
live, your story is one that, is, I feel it's about self-love. It's
Yeah.
about, you know, really understanding yourself and, seeing the value in yourself.
Hmm.
Um, Give us a little bit of a synopsis of just kind of how, what your journey has looked like in total and kind of where you're at in that journey right now.
Sure. Um, Gosh, this is a really good question, because I don't think that self love has a final destination. It is a constant journey of self discovery and learning to be kind to yourself and giving yourself grace, over and over, and believing in yourself over and over and giving yourself confidence. Um, but I would say, especially in my moments where I have been working on self love, is when I have realized that, as I more and more am starting to do things that make me happy or being the person that I really want to be, not everyone is going to like me, and that's going to have to be okay. You know, some people may have really good reasons, and some people may have really poor reasons, and most of the times you won't ever even know what those reasons are. But you have to be able to accept that with no reaction. You know, when I started to really love myself and do what I wanted to do, and the things that made me happy, I learned that there were people in my life that I had known for a very long time, and they knew this old version of me. It was a version that didn't even exist anymore, actually. It hadn't existed for several years. But because they didn't like my behavior or my actions or my personality, or because it didn't match the person that they knew previously, they insisted that I was acting that way because, you know, they thought I was the same girl who still needed to prove herself, and who didn't feel like she was good enough. So some people actually still kind of refuse to believe how much I value myself. And they think that what I do is, you know, just for a show, or that I'm desperate for approval still. And I just think that that's sad for them. But it's not my job to make other people feel comfortable, I've learned. And my real self-love just kind of proved that I could allow other people to have those opinions of me without me trying to change it or defend, you know, who I am now, because my happiness was just so much more than that.
That's great. That's awesome. You know, I really love the idea that the journey to self love never ends, because it never really should end, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, you should never stop seeking value for yourself and stop seeking that love for yourself. Because if you're not gonna love yourself, who is? You know. So,
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
I like that. Um, you know, I think we have some views, and I'm sure this video is going to be viewed by people that have kids of their own. You know,
Mhm.
I have a 6-year-old daughter, and you know, some of the things that you talk about in your journey are things that are kind of, you know, going through my head right now. It's like, okay, this, you know, this happened at 10 years old for you. She's only 4 years away from that. So, what's some advice that you can just give parents that are watching right now? You know, parents with, you know, young daughters growing up, that maybe daughters on the cusp of adolescence.
Mhm.
What's some advice that you can give parents right now?
I would say, first of all, communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. When you're tired of communicating, communicate more. Because even if they don't want to talk, eventually, if you keep saying it over and over and over, um, they're going to know that they can, even if they don't want to, they still hear that. I would say the other part of that is being open. And by that, I mean being open to hearing anything, being open to hearing things that you don't want to hear as a parent, being open to hearing things that you don't want to know that they're doing or they're seeing or they've experienced. You know, I was such a sensitive child. A lot of people didn't like that I had so much emotion growing up. And as emotional as I was, there was actually even a lot more underneath the surface that I didn't tell people about for a lot of reasons. Because I was already such a perfectionist and I wanted to be a superstar and all this. And I think I thought that giving and showing all of myself was going to be considered weak because I was such a sensitive person. um, but you know, those emotions and those feelings, if they're not talked about and if they're not worked through in a healthy way, they are not going to just go away. They're going to manifest themselves differently, and not typically in a positive way. So talking to your daughters is just so important to know how they're feeling and what they're going through.
Okay. And then lastly, you know, bring it all back to the sorority world. You know, I know, so since I've started doing this work, I've had so many of my friends that have come up to me, or, you know, has got a hold of me on Facebook and, you know, said to me like, hey, Joey, so you know that I'm a survivor too. To which I'm like, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's gotten to the point where, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, probably bad, but it's gotten to the point now where when someone comes and tells me that, it doesn't even phase me anymore, unfortunately, because unfortunately, you know, it's like, oh gosh, I'm kind of used to this now, which totally sucks. So I know whenever I walk in and I do a presentation for a sorority, I know just by looking at the sheer numbers that are in front of me, when I'm doing a big presentation, that there are some faces in that room that, you know, are probably dealing with it right now. or maybe have dealt with it in the past. So what's some advice that you can give to, our sorority viewership, whether you're a survivor or whether you're the sister of a survivor?
Well, as you know, I love sorority women and they have my heart. And my advice would be, the same, honestly, that I give myself, and that is be kind to yourself and give yourself grace. And understand that even whenever it feels like you're alone going through something, you are absolutely not. You're not alone at all. You are likely not even alone in your own chapter, maybe not even alone in your own pledge class for whatever you're going through. Um, and I would say if you see a sister struggling, do your best to be there for her, see how you can help. Be the one that they have no fear to call, for sure. Work on loving yourself every day. I didn't really start to love and appreciate who I was until 3 years ago. And now that's kind of maddening to me because I think about all these years that I could have had so much more fun and not been stressed out and, just enjoying everything that life offered me so much more if I had worked on my self-love. So I would encourage every woman to do that every single day and definitely to be kind to themselves.
Awesome. Well, Kate, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening, and thank you so much for jumping in. If any of our viewers want to get a hold of you to maybe ask you any questions or anything, how can they do that?
They can definitely check me out on Facebook or contact me on my mobile. I'm happy to do all that too. You let me know how you want to put that information out. I'm happy to do that. I'm always happy to talk to women about anything that's on their heart for sure. So.
Okay. Well, how about this? For anyone that's watching right now, if you want to reach out to Kate, if you have questions or you need advice or guidance, or you just want to say good job, if you're on our Instagram, you can just DM us. Greek_law_Inc. Is the Instagram. So you can just send us a DM there, or you can send us a DM on our Facebook page, Greek Law Inc. on Facebook, and we'll get you tied up with Kate if you need her. So Kate, thank you once again for just everything. Thank you for being on our first guest here on Teal Tint. For everyone watching, we'll do this again next Thursday. Next Thursday at 7, Thomas Geary from Tau Kappa Epsilon's chapter at IUS, he'll be on, and we'll be talking about, kind of what it means to be an advocate and being a male advocate, someone to kind of step up on the front line and holding other men responsible for their actions. So check that out next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, stay safe in these quarantine times we're living in. Y'all
All
have a
right.
good one.
Thanks, Joey.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.